All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today, we're diving deep into some seriously shattery stuff. Project M Cultra. It's like something straight out of a Cold War spy thriller.
Oh, yeah,
But this is real deal stuff, folks.
definitely.
We're talking about the CIA, mind control, the whole nine yards.
Rika.
And the best part, we've got declassified documents straight from the CIA's own Intellipedia.
hmm
So we're getting the info right from the source, you know? You can practically feel the Cold War paranoia just radiating off these pages.
Oh, absolutely. The fear of brainwashing,
Yeah.
the race to weaponize the human mind.
It's all right here in
Oh,
black and white.
crazy, right?
Absolutely. So tell me, just how big was this whole Culture thing? Was it just a few guys in a basement messing around with LSD, or was this a major operation?
Oh, no, no. This wasn't some small-scale thing.
Okay.
We're talking about a massive program, around 150 sub-projects,
Wow.
millions of dollars poured into research.
Billions.
Yeah, millions. The CIA was really invested in this, trying to unlock the potential of mind control.
So they were serious about this.
Dead serious.
What exactly sparked their interest in mind control? Why was the CIA so obsessed with it?
Well, it all goes back to the Korean War.
Right.
There were reports of American prisoners of war being subjected to some pretty strange techniques by the Soviets, the Chinese, the North Koreans.
What's brainwashing?
Exactly. And that really spooked U.S. intelligence. They were worried about falling behind in this whole new frontier of warfare.
So they were basically playing catch up, trying to understand and maybe even weaponize these techniques.
You got it. They wanted to figure out how these methods worked, see if they could use them on their own captives, maybe even influence foreign leaders.
It sounds a lot like the Manchurian Candidate idea, you know? A
Hmm.
brainwashed assassin program to do their bidding.
Right. And historians do believe that creating a reliable, controllable asset like that was a major goal of MKUltra.
But just how close did they come to achieving that goal? I mean, is mind control even possible?
Well, the human mind is a complex thing, you
Yeah.
know. And even with all their resources, the CIA struggled to exert that level of control over people.
Oh.
The documents show that their attempts to manipulate individuals often led to unpredictable results.
So maybe mind control wasn't as easy as they thought it would be.
It seems that way.
So how did they go about trying to control minds? What were their methods?
Well, one of their early focuses was LSD.
LSD, huh? The drug that became so popular in the 60s.
Yeah, but back then, it was still a new and mysterious substance. There was a sense that it held the key to unlocking the subconscious.
So the CIA saw LSD as a potential tool for mind control.
Exactly.
And what about the ethics of all this? Was there any oversight on these experiments?
Honestly, the documents paint a pretty grim picture.
Oh.
It seems national security often trumped ethical concerns during that era. The attitude was that the ends justified the means.
Even if those means involved seriously messing with people's minds?
Yeah, even then.
What kind of experiments were they doing with LSD? Can you give us some specific examples?
Well, there's one that's particularly chilling. Operation Midnight Climax.
Okay.
The CIA set up brothels in a couple of cities.
Brothels.
Yeah, they were dosing unsuspecting men with LSD, observing their behavior, trying to see if the drug could be used for interrogation or manipulation.
So these were CIA-run brothels.
That's right. They even had one-way mirrors and recording equipment to document everything.
Wow, that is seriously creepy.
It's a really disturbing part of this whole story.
Did anyone ever volunteer for these experiments? Or was it all unwitting subjects?
There were some volunteers, but even those experiments often pushed ethical boundaries.
How so?
One document mentions a volunteer being given LSD for, get this, 77 days straight.
77 days. That's insane. What happened to him? What were the long-term effects on these subjects?
It's ironic, actually. The whole LSD thing kind of backfired on them.
Backfire.
Instead of making people more suggestible, LSD often had the opposite effect.
Really?
Many subjects became more paranoid, more resistant to interrogation.
So LSD actually made them less controllable.
Exactly. And that's why the CIA eventually shifted their focus away from LSD.
Okay, so LSD was a bust. But they didn't give up on mind control altogether, did they?
Oh no, not at all.
So what did they try next?
When LSD didn't work out, they started experimenting with a whole bunch of other drugs.
Like what?
Heroin, morphine, mescaline, psilocybin, even marijuana. Basically anything that could alter perception, mood, or behavior.
They were really determined to find something that worked, weren't they?
It seems that way.
Anything particularly noteworthy about these other experiments?
One technique that stands out is their use of speedballs.
Speedballs. What's that?
It's a combination of barbiturates, which are depressants, and amphetamines, which are stimulants.
Why would they combine those?
They were trying to create a state of confusion and disorientation in their subjects, hoping they would blurt out secrets or become more susceptible to suggestion.
So it was like a truth serum of sorts.
In a way, yes. But it was a brutal and risky technique.
It's amazing how far they were willing to go, isn't it?
It really is.
And it wasn't just drugs, right? They explored other avenues of mind control, too.
Yeah, they were really interested in hypnosis, for example.
Hypnosis. That seems a little out there, even for the CIA.
Well, they believed hypnosis could be used to plant suggestions, enhance memory, maybe even sharpen a person's senses.
Interesting.
Did it work? Hard to say. The details on that are pretty scarce.
Figures. But it's fascinating to see how far they were willing to go in their quest for mind control.
Yeah, and you know what's even crazier? They even hired a magician.
A magician! Seriously.
Yeah. John Mulholland, a famous magician back then.
What did he do for the CIA?
He wrote manuals for them. On sleight of hand, deception, all that spy stuff.
So they were using magic tricks for mind control.
Well, not exactly. More like using those techniques for covert communication and manipulation.
It's amazing how creative they were, I guess.
Yeah, these manuals were only recently rediscovered, you know.
So we're still learning new things about MKUltra all these years later.
Definitely. But there's one chapter of MKUltra that's particularly dark. The Canadian experiments.
I've heard about those. Pretty horrific stuff.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron and his experiments at McGill University in Montreal.
What made those experiments so awful?
Well, Cameron had this idea called psychic driving.
Psychic driving? What's that?
Basically, he thought he could erase a person's mind and reprogram them with new beliefs.
Like brainwashing.
Yeah, basically. He was using drug-induced comas, electroshock therapy, all sorts of brutal stuff.
And who were his subjects?
There were patients at the Institute. Many of them were there for minor issues like anxiety or depression.
So they had no idea what they were getting into?
No, not at all. And many of them suffered terrible consequences.
That is so messed up. And the CIA was involved in this?
Yeah, they funded some of his research.
Wow, this is just unbelievable.
And get this, the Canadian government was in on it too.
Seriously?
They knew about the experiments and even helped fund them.
So it wasn't just the CIA going rogue, it was a whole government conspiracy.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It sure does. But how did all this come to light? How was MKUltra exposed?
Well, in 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all the MKUltra files destroyed.
Classic cover-up move.
Right. But thankfully, some documents survived.
Yeah.
And in 1975, the New York Times published a bombshell report about these illegal CIA experiments.
And that's when the whole thing blew up.
Yep. It led to a bunch of investigations, congressional hearings, the whole 9 yards.
What happened to the people involved? Did anyone face consequences?
Some victims and their families sued the government, demanding justice. And one case in particular stands out, Frank Olson.
I've heard that name. He was the biochemist who died under mysterious circumstances, right?
Yeah. He was given LSD without his knowledge at a CIA retreat and ended up falling from a hotel window in New York.
That sounds suspicious. Did they ever figure out what happened?
The CIA claimed it was suicide, but his family always believed he was murdered to keep him quiet.
So Olson's death is still a mystery.
It is. And it really highlights the dark side of MKUltra, the length they were willing to go to protect their secrets.
Olson's story is just one example of the damage MKUltra caused, isn't it?
Yeah, with so many documents destroyed, we may never know the full extent of it all.
It's a chilling reminder of how powerful and how dangerous the human mind can be.
Absolutely. And that's something to keep in mind as we explore the rest of this story.
Okay, listeners, we're just getting started with this deep dive into MKUltra. Stay tuned for more. Last time, things got pretty dark with those Canadian experiments.
Yeah, those were rough.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the people who were potentially involved with MKUltra. You mentioned some familiar names.
Yeah, there are a few. Like Theodore Kaczynski?
Wait, the Unabomber?
Yeah, him. Now, before he became the Unabomber, Kaczynski was a brilliant mathematician.
Right.
He went to Harvard, and while he was there, he participated in these psychological experiments.
Okay.
And get this, the guy running those experiments, Henry Murray, had connections to the CIA.
Interesting.
His research was funded by the Navy, and some believe the CIA was secretly involved too.
So these weren't your typical college psych studies.
Not even close. They were designed to push people to their limits, see how much stress and manipulation they could handle.
Sounds intense. What exactly did they do to these guys?
They used verbal abuse, personal attacks, really tried to break them down. They even put them in stressful situations, force them to defend their beliefs against a hostile crowd.
Wow, those are some pretty aggressive techniques.
Right, and it's very similar to some of the methods used in MKUltra.
So do you think these experiments could have contributed to Kaczynski's turn to violence?
Well, it's impossible to say for sure,
Yeah.
but it's certainly plausible that these experiments played a role in shaping his worldview, his distrust of authority.
It's a chilling thought, that these experiments might have had such a profound and lasting impact.
It really is. And it highlights the ethical complexities of MKUltra. Even if they didn't achieve mind control, they definitely messed with a lot of lives.
No doubt about it. But let's move on to someone a little less sinister, Ken Kesey.
Ken Kesey, the guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
The one and only. And guess what? He was involved in MKUltra, too.
No way. Really?
Yeah. He volunteered for experiments while he was a student at Stanford.
Wow.
They were studying the effects of LSD, psilocybin, all sorts of psychedelics.
So the guy who basically became the poster child for LSD was actually introduced to it by the CIA.
Pretty ironic, right?
That's wild. Do you think those experiments influenced his writing at all?
Almost certainly. His experiences with LSD definitely shaped his views on consciousness, his whole outlook on life.
That's amazing. So MKUltra, a program meant to control minds, might have actually helped spark the counterculture movement.
It's a strange twist of fate, isn't it?
Totally. It shows you how unpredictable the effects of these experiments could be.
Absolutely. And Kesey wasn't the only one. We've got Candy Jones, too.
Candy Jones, who's that?
She was a famous fashion model back in the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
And she claimed to have been a victim of MKUltra.
Seriously. What did they do to her?
She said they brainwashed her, turned her into a courier for the CIA.
A model spy. That's crazy.
Yeah, she claimed she was carrying messages and documents all over the world without even knowing it.
Do you think she was telling the truth?
It's hard to say. Some people believe her, others think she made it all up. But it's definitely a compelling story.
Yeah, it's like something straight out of a movie.
Exactly. But it reminds us that MKUltra wasn't just about experimenting with drugs. They were exploring all sorts of ways to manipulate people.
And we may never know the full extent of their activities, right?
Probably not. But one thing's for sure, this whole MKUltra thing was a massive ethical violation.
Absolutely. They experimented on countless people, often without their consent, and caused who knows how much damage.
We've talked about some pretty high-profile people, but we can't forget about all the ordinary folks who are caught up in this mess.
Yeah, those are the real tragedies, the people whose lives were ruined by these experiments.
And they're the ones who are often forgotten.
It's important to remember them, to honor their suffering.
Agreed. But before we wrap up this section, there's one more person we need to mention. James Whitey Bulger.
Whitey Bulger, the mobster.
The one and only.
What does he have to do with MKUltra?
Well, back in the 50s, while he was in prison for bank robbery, Bulger volunteered for an LSD experiment.
He volunteered. Why would he do that?
Some say he thought it would get him a shorter sentence. Others think he was just curious about LSD, wanted to see what it was like.
It's weird to think of a guy like Bulger, a ruthless criminal, willingly taking LSD.
It is pretty strange. But it shows you how far MKUltra's reach extended. They were experimenting on all sorts of people.
Yeah, from academics to counterculture icons to hardened criminals. It seems like no one was off limits.
So with all these experiments, all these different subjects, did they ever actually achieve mind control?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And with all the documents destroyed, we may never know for sure.
Some experts think MKUltra was a complete failure, a waste of time and money.
But others believe they did achieve some level of success.
Yeah, some argue that they developed techniques for subtle manipulation, ways to influence behavior without the person even realizing it.
That's a scary thought.
It is, and it makes you wonder if some of those techniques are still being used today.
That's a discussion for another time, I think.
Definitely. But MKUltra serves as a warning, a reminder that the quest for mind control can lead down some very dark paths.
Absolutely. Speaking of dark paths, let's go back to Frank Olson, the biochemist who died under such suspicious circumstances.
His story is a tragic reminder of the human cost of these experiments.
And it's full of unanswered questions.
Let's dive deeper into Olson's case and try to unravel this mystery.
Okay, so Frank Olson, the biochemist, remind me again how he got mixed up in this whole MKUltra mess.
Well, Olson was working with the U.S. Army, developing biological weapons.
Yeah.
His work brought him into contact with the CIA.
Right.
And in '53, he went to this retreat, Deep Creek Lake in Maryland.
Uh-huh.
And that's where they slipped him. LSD.
Without him knowing.
Nope. His colleagues, CIA guys, they dosed him.
Wow.
And well, He had a really bad reaction to it.
Like a mental breakdown.
Yeah. Paranoia, anxiety, delusions, the whole 9 yards.
So the CIA knew they messed him up.
They did.
What did they do?
They took him to New York, wanted to get him to a psychiatrist.
Okay.
But then, just a few days later, he's dead.
Fell out of that hotel window.
It's 13th floor.
And the CIA said it was suicide.
Suicide? Yeah, because of the LSD. A mental breakdown.
But his family didn't buy it.
Nope. They always suspected foul play.
Thought the CIA killed him.
To keep him quiet.
About McCultra.
Exactly.
I mean, it does sound suspicious.
There were a lot of inconsistencies, you know.
Like what?
Witnesses said Olson had bruises, not the kind you get from just falling.
Hmm.
And apparently he was scared of heights, too.
So how did he just jump out of a 13th floor window?
Yeah, it doesn't add up.
So what happened? Did the family ever find out the truth?
Well, they fought for answers for years. And in 75, when all this MKUltra stuff came out, President Ford actually apologized to them.
Wow.
They even got a settlement from the government. And they exhumed Olson's body, had a second autopsy.
What did they find?
It didn't completely rule out suicide, but the pathologist said homicide was more likely.
So he was probably murdered.
Seems that way.
But we'll never know for sure.
Probably not. It's a case that'll probably always be shrouded in mystery.
It's a tragedy, really.
It is. It shows how far the CIA was willing to go
To protect their secrets.
and how much damage they caused in the process.
Olson's story is just one piece of this whole MKUltra puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big, complicated puzzle.
With a lot of missing pieces.
And we may never have all the answers.
But we've learned a lot, haven't we?
Oh, we have. MKUltra was a dark chapter in our history.
It shows what can happen when power goes unchecked.
And when the pursuit of knowledge crosses ethical lines.
It's a lesson we should never forget.
Agreed. We need to be vigilant, you know?
Mm.
Question authority.
And protect our own minds.
Absolutely.
Well, listeners, this has been a wild ride, hasn't it?
It has.
We've gone deep, explored the dark side of government, the secrets of mind control,
Learned about LSD, brainwashing, all sorts of crazy stuff.
and the stories of the people caught up in it all.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. The more we know about the past,
The better equipped we are to face the future.
that's a good way to put it.
So stay curious, stay informed.
And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.